The night on the outer colony of Vega 9 was silent, except for the soft hum of engines and the whisper of desert wind against metal walls. Ethan Hayes, a human engineer, returned from a long shift at the maintenance yard. His shoulders were sore, his eyes half closed, and his mind full of nothing but the thought of sleep. The outpost was small, just a cluster of gray buildings surrounded by sand and endless stars. Life there was lonely but simple, until that night changed everything. When Ethan opened the door to his small quarters, the lights flickered on automatically. Everything looked the same as always. His workbench full of tools, his old bed, the cracked window that showed a strip of dark sky. But something felt wrong. The air was cold, sharper than usual. He frowned and took a step forward, listening. Then he heard it, a faint sound like a whisper or a soft breath coming from under the bunk. Ethan froze. The colonies weren't supposed to have visitors, and he lived alone. Slowly he bent down, his flashlight in hand. The beam of light hit the floor, and then a face. A young alien girl was crouched there, her silver blue eyes wide with fear. Her skin was pale like moonlight, her hair long and soft, and a pair of small pointed ears twitched on her head. She was trembling, holding a thin metallic device close to her chest. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she whispered, "Please, don't call them." Ethan blinked. "Who?" "The guards," she said in a shaky voice. Her accent was strange, her English broken, but her fear was clear. "They will take me back." Ethan's first thought was that she was some kind of escaped experiment. He knew the outpost had secret labs beyond the hills. Maybe she came from there. He stood slowly, trying not to scare her. "Hey, it's okay," he said carefully. "I'm not calling anyone, just come out." She hesitated, then crawled out from under the bunk. She was small, maybe the size of a young adult, wearing torn clothes made of some kind of silver fabric. Her hands were shaking. When she looked up at him, her eyes reflected the light like glass. Ethan crossed his arms. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard. "Hiding. They look for me." "I had nowhere," Ethan sighed. "You can't stay here. If anyone finds out, I'll be in trouble too." Her ears lowered slightly like a frightened animal. "Please," she said softly. "Just one night. I will go when the suns rise." He hesitated. He was tired, confused. But something about her voice made him stop. She didn't look dangerous. She looked scared, lost. "All right," he said finally. "One night. But you stay quiet. Understand?" Her eyes brightened instantly. "Yes, quiet, I can be quiet." Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. "I'll hold you to that." He went to the kitchen and found a food pack. "You hungry?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Hungry?" He tore open the pack and handed it to her. She sniffed it carefully, then took a small bite. Her face lit up in surprise. "Sweet," she said with a small smile. "Human food is sweet," Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, that's chocolate." She nodded like she was memorizing the word. "Choco. Late." For a few minutes they sat in silence. She ate slowly, watching him curiously. When he asked her name, she answered, "Lyra." The name suited her, soft and strange. "So, Lyra," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "Where are you from?" She hesitated, looking down. "Far. My people call it Erythea." "You will not know it," he shrugged. "You'd be surprised. I've worked with a lot of species," but she shook her head. "Not like mine, my people. Don't like humans." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And yet here you are, hiding in a human's room." Her voice dropped. "Because you don't kill me." That quiet statement hit him harder than he expected. He looked at her again and realized she had bruises on her wrists, faint marks that looked like restraints. His anger rose, but he kept his tone calm. "Did someone hurt you?" She looked away. "I ran from them. They say I am a mistake. They say I bring shame." Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. Whoever she was, she didn't deserve this. "Well," he said finally, "no one's going to hurt you here. You can rest." She looked at him carefully as if she didn't quite believe it. "Why help me?" she asked softly. Ethan shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do." She studied his face for a long time, then gave a small nod. "Humans, strange. Kind but strange." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." That night, while she slept curled up on the floor under a blanket, Ethan sat awake by the window. The stars looked peaceful, but his mind wasn't. He knew the risk he was taking. If security foin, curled up on the floor beside his toolbox, holding a small metal piece between her fingers. Her silver hair shimmered faintly under the cabin's weak lights. She looked up when she noticed him awake and smiled shyly. "Good morning, human Ethan," she said in her soft, broken English. Ethan sat up, rubbed his eyes, and tried to sound calm. "Lyra, right? You really shouldn't be here. If anyone finds out, I'll be in deep trouble." Lyra blinked, confused. "Trouble? But you saved me." She held out the small drone part she had been working on. "Your machine?" "It was broken. I fix." Ethan stared at the drone. It was one of his repair bots that hadn't worked in months. He took it from her hands and pressed the activation button. The drone whirred to life, spinning slowly in the air. Ethan was stunned. "You actually fixed it?" Lyra's tail flicked once behind her, an unconscious sign of pride. "I learn fast," she said with a little grin. "Humans make simple things, but kind things." Ethan almost smiled but caught himself. "You can't just stay here," he said firmly. "Security checks every room twice a week. If they find you, both of us are finished." Lyra's smile faded. Her ears lowered and she looked away. "I have nowhere," she whispered. "They will take me back to Cage." That word, Cage, made Ethan stop. He sat back on the edge of his bunk, watching her small, trembling hands. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't lying. She was just scared. He took a deep breath and said, "All right. You can stay for a few days, but you have to stay quiet. No noise, no lights, and don't touch the sensors." Her eyes lit up instantly. She nodded quickly, her silver hair bouncing. "Yes, Ethan, I stay quiet, promise." For the next few days, Ethan tried to live normally while hiding her presence. He brought extra food from the cafeteria, claiming he was working longer shifts. Lyra stayed in his quarters during the day, exploring his tools, sketching things on his old tablet, and sometimes watching the stars from the small window. She asked endless questions about Earth, why humans built cities, why they fought wars, and why they smiled even when they were sad. Ethan tried his best to answer, though her curiosity never seemed to end. One night, while Ethan worked on repairing a damaged circuit board, Lyra sat cross-legged beside him, staring. "Humans fix things even when broken," she said softly. "Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Because giving up isn't something we're good at." She nodded as if that explained everything. "That is why humans make good mates." Ethan froze mid-solder. "What did you just say?" "Mates," she repeated innocently. "On my world, when someone helps, protects, and stays with you, they are your mate." She tilted her head. "You saved me. You keep me safe. You bring food. You are my mate." Ethan almost dropped the tool. "Lyra, that's not how it works here." He tried not to laugh, but also not to encourage her misunderstanding. Humans don't just call people mates for that. It means something different. Lyra looked confused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Then maybe your word is different, but your meaning same." Ethan shook his head, not knowing what to say. He could feel her gaze on him, calm and curious, as if she were studying his very soul. The next day, things became complicated. A patrol drone passed through the housing section for a random inspection. Its scanner beeped as it moved along the corridor outside Ethan's door. Lyra was sitting on his bed, quietly watching a video about Earth's oceans. The sound was faint, but enough to make Ethan's heart race. "Lyra, hide. Now," he whispered sharply. She jumped off the bed and crawled under the table just as the door beeped open. The patrol drone floated in, scanning the room. Ethan forced a lazy smile. "Maintenance check, huh? Didn't know you guys came by so early." The drone's voice was metallic and cold. "Unregistered life signature detected." "Scanning for confirmation." Ethan's heart pounded. He stepped in front of the sensor deliberately, pretending to drop his data pad. "Oh, sorry. Must be some interference from my tools. The calibrator's been acting weird lately." He quickly tapped his wristband, sending a false reading loop to the drone's system. After a few tense seconds, the drone beeped again. "False positive detected. No violation. Proceed." It hovered away out the door. As soon as it left, Ethan locked the door and collapsed into a chair. Lyra crawled out from under the table, her face pale. "You saved me again," she whispered. Her voice trembled with emotion. "You risked your life." Ethan didn't answer. He just leaned back, breathing hard. Finally, he said quietly, "You of his workshop tools." At first, he thought something had malfunctioned, but then he saw her again. Lyra, standing over his desk, holding a soldering iron with both hands. Sparks glimmered as she fixed a damaged circuit on one of his security drones. "What are you doing?" Ethan said, his voice still rough from sleep. Lyra looked up and smiled. Your drone eye's broken, I fix. Now it sees better. He rubbed his forehead. You can't just play with that stuff. If this thing connects to the network, it'll report everything it sees. She tilted her head in confusion. It helps humans, yes? Why would it tell on us? Because it's not our friend, Ethan said. He took the small machine and disconnected its core power. It follows orders, not feelings. Lyra watched silently as he worked, her tail lowering. That is sad, she whispered. Machines without hearts. Ethan sighed and set the drone aside. That's how it is out here. Rules, systems, scanners. Nobody wants to think, they just obey. Her eyes softened. You don't obey. He looked at her, half amused, half tired. If I did, you wouldn't be here. They both fell quiet. The silence between them was warm but heavy. For the first time, Ethan saw how the silver tone of her hair caught the light like threads of moonlight. She didn't belong in this cold metal outpost. She looked like she belonged somewhere free, under open skies. Later that day, Ethan went to the outpost command to hand in his repair reports. As he passed through the hall, a group of guards stood near the bulletin board. They were talking loudly about a royal ship searching for a missing person. A holographic notice glowed above the board, an alien woman with silver hair, fox-like ears, and soft eyes. The caption read, Wanted Missing Royal Asset. Approach with caution. Ethan's blood ran cold. He didn't need to look twice to know it was Lyra. He forced himself to act normal, signed his report, and walked out quickly. His heart was pounding by the time he reached his quarters. When he entered, Lyra was sitting on his bunk trying to read his datapad. She looked up and smiled. You are early today. Ethan closed the door behind him. We need to talk. Her smile faded. What's wrong? He hesitated, then said softly, They're looking for you, Lyra. There's a bounty on your name. They called you a royal asset. That means you're not just some traveler, you're someone important. Her expression darkened. She stood slowly, her hands trembling. They found the message already? What message? Ethan asked. She lowered her eyes. My father's council wanted me to marry a warlord. To make peace. I refused. They called me broken, unwanted. I ran away and sent a message to my people asking them to stop the war. They erased me from the family record and said I was a danger to our honor. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. So you're a princess? I was, she said quietly. Now I am nothing, he rubbed his face. If the patrol finds you here, they'll take you back, or worse. Lyra's voice trembled. If they take me, they will kill me in silence. They cannot let the galaxy see a runaway royal. Please, Ethan, don't give me to them. Ethan didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, staring out at the stars. He was just a human engineer, no soldier, no hero. But when he looked back at her, something inside him shifted. He couldn't hand her over. Not after seeing her fear. You'll have to stay hidden, he said finally. We'll need a plan. She nodded quickly, her eyes shining with relief. You protect me again, she said softly. My mate is brave, Ethan sighed. I'm not your mate, Lyra. She tilted her head with that same innocent smile. Then what are you? He didn't have an answer. That night, as they were eating, the alarm suddenly blared. Ethan jumped to his feet, checking the control screen. A patrol drone had detected an unauthorized life signature in the residential block. Stay here, he whispered. He rushed to the door, trying to act normal as a scanning light swept across the corridor. The drone hovered in front of him, its lens glowing red. Unregistered signal detected within this room, it said in a metallic tone. Ethan's mind raced. That's impossible, he lied. Maybe a calibration error? The drone floated past him and began to scan the interior. Lyra hid under the bunk, holding her breath. The sensor light glowed closer and closer. Ethan's hands shook as he reached behind the drone and pulled out a maintenance chip, inserting a coded command. System override, he muttered. Reset local memory. The drone beeped uncertainly. Error. Memory reset confirmed. No violation detected. It turned and left the room. Ethan locked the door and leaned against it, his heart racing. Lyra crawled out slowly, her eyes wide. You risked everything again, she whispered. He tried to smile, though his hands were still trembling. That was too close. She stepped forward and touched his arm lightly. You could have let them take me, but you didn't. Why? Ethan didn't look at her. Because I've seen too many people treated like tools. You're not one of them, she smiled softly. Humans protect their mates, she said again. He chuckled weakly. You really won't stop calling me that, will you? She shook her head. No, because it feels true. Ethan didn't argue this time. He just stared out the small window where is. Her eyes met his, soft but steady. You are not afraid of death, are you? He smiled faintly. Not really, but I'm afraid of losing good people. That's rarer than life itself. Lyra's lips trembled into a smile and she nodded slowly. You sound like my mother, she said quietly. She was the only one who believed love could save our people. Before Ethan could answer, the door alarm beeped. Both of them froze. He quickly checked the console. An encrypted message had arrived from Central Command. The subject line made his stomach twist. Royal Search Team docked, all quarters subject to inspection. Lyra stood up, panic flashing in her eyes. They are here, she whispered. Ethan's mind raced. We can't stay here. The security sweep will start within the hour. He opened the hidden storage panel under the floor, pulling out a small emergency pack. Grab what you can carry. We're leaving. Lyra blinked in confusion. Leaving? Where will we go? He looked at her. Off-world. Minutes later, they slipped through the maintenance tunnels below the outpost. The air was cold and thick with dust. Pipes hissed quietly as steam leaked through cracks. Lyra followed close behind, her tail brushing against his arm now and then. She tried not to make a sound, but her breathing grew heavy from fear. At one intersection, Ethan stopped suddenly and raised his hand. 2 armored patrol guards were passing above them, their boots echoing against the metal floor. He waited until they were gone, then whispered, This way. They reached the hangar bay where a row of old cargo shuttles sat unused. Most were locked, but Ethan knew one of them, the Drift Sparrow, still had a manual override. He had repaired it months ago for a transport company that never came back. He pried open the access hatch and motioned for Lyra to climb in. As she slipped inside, lights flared behind them. Voices shouted and footsteps pounded down the corridor. Freeze. Step away from the shuttle. Ethan slammed the hatch shut and jumped into the pilot seat. Hold on, he shouted. The engines roared to life with a deep rumble. The ship shuddered as blaster fire struck the hull. Lyra clutched the seat beside him. Fear and awe mixed in her expression. They will destroy us. Not if I fly faster than their scanners. He hit the thrusters and the Drift Sparrow blasted out of the hangar. The outpost alarms wailed, red lights chasing them into the open stars. The stars stretched into long silver lines as the shuttle jumped to sublight speed. Ethan leaned back, breathing hard. We made it, he said, though his hands were still shaking. Lyra stared out the window, her face lit by the glow of the engines. You risked everything, she whispered again. He glanced at her. You think I could just let them take you? She turned toward him, her voice trembling. They would have killed you, but you saved me anyway. Why? Ethan hesitated. He didn't have a clear answer. Maybe it was instinct, maybe something deeper. He finally said, Because no one deserves to be hunted for wanting to live free. She smiled, tears in her eyes. On my world, that is the vow of a bondmate. He gave a weak laugh. You and that word again. Lyra giggled softly but said nothing more. The laughter faded into quiet as the stars drifted around them. For the first time, she seemed at peace. Hours later, Ethan noticed the ship's sensors blinking red. We've got a problem, he muttered. The long-range scanner showed a massive cruiser following their trail. It bore the royal insignia of her father's fleet. Lyra gasped. That is my father's envoy. They will not stop. Ethan gritted his teeth. Then we'll make them chase ghosts. He rerouted the power, using the ship's mining beacons to create multiple false signatures. The radar filled with phantom echoes, confusing the enemy's sensors. For several tense minutes, the cruiser tried to lock on, but the signals scattered across the sector. Finally, the tracking alarm went silent. The cruiser vanished from their radar. Ethan exhaled deeply. Looks like we lost them for now. Lyra looked at him with admiration. You are clever, human Ethan. He smirked tiredly. More like lucky, she shook her head. No, you are brave. And kind. He turned to face her, the soft glow of the dashboard lighting her face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then quietly, Lyra said, If we live, I will never forget this. Ethan smiled faintly. We'll live. I promise. Outside, the stars shimmered like silent witnesses. Far behind them, the royal fleet still searched. But for now, inside that small stolen ship drifting between worlds, a human and an unwanted alien princess shared the same fragile hope. That freedom was worth every risk. The old cargo shuttle drifted through the dark emptiness between stars. The hum of the engines was the only sound inside. Ethan sat in the pilot's chair staring at the control screen. The oxygen meter blinked in yellow, and the power cells were dropping fast. They had escaped the royal fleet, but they were alone in deep space with little fuel and no food left. Lyra sat near the viewport watching the stars pass slowly. Her long silver hair floated gently in the low gravity. She looked calm, but Ethan could tell she was tired. Days of hiding and running had left both of them worn out. He checked the readings again and muttered to himself, "At this rate, we won't make it to the next station." Lyra turned her head. "How far?" Ethan sighed. 2 days, maybe 3 if the engines hold. But the life support system won't last that long. She looked down at her hands. "You should have left me," she whispered. "You could have stayed safe." Ethan glanced back at her. "Lyra, I already told you." "I'm not that kind of person," she smiled faintly. "Humans are strange. You fight even when hope is small." "Yeah," he said with a tired grin. "That's kind of our thing." Hours passed in silence. Lyra finally fell asleep, her head resting against the wall. Ethan watched her for a moment. Even now, with the ship breaking apart, she looked peaceful, like someone who still believed in light. He turned back to the console and began typing commands, trying to stretch every bit of energy left in the engines. The next morning, the ship shuddered. A warning siren flashed red. "What now?" Ethan muttered, opening the diagnostics. The reactor was overheating. He ran to the back of the ship, opened the maintenance hatch, and tried to cool the system manually. Lyra woke to the sound of metal clanging. She rushed to him. "What's wrong?" "Reactor's unstable," he said, sweat running down his face. "If it blows, we're done." She knelt beside him and touched one of the cables. "I can help. I know this type of system. My people use similar cores for smaller ships." He looked at her doubtfully but nodded. "All right, follow my lead." Together they worked fast, shutting down circuits and rerouting power. Her hands moved quickly, her eyes glowing faintly as she concentrated. In minutes, the alarm stopped. The humming steadied. Ethan leaned back, breathing hard. "You did it?" Lyra smiled. "No, we did." He laughed softly. "Guess I should stop underestimating you." She gave a playful grin. "Humans always underestimate small things, but small things can save worlds." The ship felt quiet again after the danger passed. Ethan returned to the cockpit and Lyra joined him. She looked out at the stars, her reflection shining beside his in the glass. "Your world," she said softly. "It must be beautiful." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's not perfect, but it's home. Blue oceans, green forests, cities full of light and noise." Lyra listened closely, her eyes wide like a child hearing a fairy tale. "We do not have oceans like that. Only crystal lakes. I want to see your home one day." He glanced at her and said quietly, "Maybe one day you will." For a while they sat in silence. The distance between them didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like trust. Suddenly the scanner beeped. Ethan's heart jumped. "We've got a signal. Looks like an Alliance relay station nearby." He began steering the ship toward the signal. "If we can reach it, we might refuel, maybe send a message for help." But as the ship approached, Lyra's expression changed. Her ears twitched nervously. "That is not an Alliance signal," she said in a low voice. Ethan froze. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the screen. "That frequency. It belongs to my father's fleet." "It is a trap." He cursed under his breath and pulled the throttle back, but it was too late. A massive cruiser appeared on the radar behind them. "They found us again," he said grimly. The cruiser hailed them. A calm, cold voice filled the cabin. "Unidentified vessel, power down your engines. Hand over the fugitive Princess Lyra and you will not be harmed." Lyra grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "If you surrender, they will let you live." He shook his head. "And what about you?" She looked down. "They will take me back. But maybe it is better than seeing you die for me." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said firmly, "No one gets to decide that except us." He turned on the ship's recorder. "If they want you, they're going to hear your story first." He hit the broadcast switch. The message transmitted across the open channel, reaching every ship in range. It contained Lyra's words, her father's order, and proof of the royal court's cruelty. It showed her plea for peace, the reason she ran away, and how she was branded unwanted for refusing to marry a warlord. The cruiser tried to jam the signal, but the message was already spreading. Ethan and Lyra watched the screen as news relays began echoing the transmission. The galaxy was hearing her truth. The cruiser began charging its weapons. Ethan looked at Lyra. Get ready for impact. The first blast hit the shuttle, shaking it violently. Sparks flew, alarms screamed. Ethan struggled to keep control while Lyra tried to stabilize the systems. They'll destroy us, she said. Not if we make them stop first, he replied. He rerouted the last of their power to the defense shields. The shuttle trembled as another blast struck, but this time it held. Outside, other Alliance patrol ships began arriving. The broadcast had reached them, and now the Royal Cruiser was surrounded. Ethan slumped back in his chair, exhausted. Looks like your message worked. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. You saved me again. You saved my people's truth, he gave her a weak smile. You did that yourself. The shuttle floated quietly as rescue ships surrounded them. The stars outside seemed brighter now, and for the first time since their escape, Lyra smiled with hope. She looked at him softly and said, My people call such bravery a bond for life. You risked everything for me, Ethan. I will never forget. Ethan smiled back, his voice gentle. You don't have to. I'm not going anywhere. As the rescue beacon flashed, the human and the unwanted alien princess sat side by side, watching the dawn of a new beginning light the stars around them. The small shuttle drifted quietly in space, surrounded now by larger Alliance ships. Rescue lights flashed in soft blue and white, cutting through the darkness. Ethan sat in the pilot's chair, breathing heavily. His body ached from the shaking during the battle, and his head buzzed with exhaustion. Beside him, Lyra was watching the stars with wide eyes, her face a mix of relief and fear. They were safe for the moment, but the danger wasn't over yet. An incoming message appeared on the screen. This is Commander Dalen of the Alliance Patrol, said a deep voice. You are ordered to dock immediately for questioning. Please shut down your engines. Ethan exhaled slowly. Looks like our break's over. Lyra looked at him anxiously. They will take me, she whispered. My father's envoy will demand it. He turned to her. If they try, I'll tell them everything. The truth's out there now. You're not a criminal anymore. She shook her head sadly. To them, I still am. Ethan reached out and touched her shoulder gently. Then I'll stand with you. She blinked, her ears twitching slightly. You mean that? He smiled. I do. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang. Armed officers entered, scanning the area. Lyra stood close behind Ethan as he raised his hands calmly. The leader of the squad stepped forward, studying her. So it's true, he said. You're the princess who ran away. Lyra straightened her posture. I am Lyra of House Valen, but I'm not property. I left because I refused to be traded for power. The officer glanced at Ethan. And you're the human who helped her broadcast the message? Ethan nodded. That's right. The officer hesitated, then said quietly, The whole galaxy saw it. The Alliance Council has called an emergency hearing. You're both being taken to the capital station. They were escorted through long halls lined with polished metal. Everywhere they walked, people stared at Lyra. Some whispered, others bowed. It was clear the news had spread fast. For the first time, Ethan realized that her act of rebellion had changed more than just their lives. It had shaken an empire. Hours later, they stood inside a vast courtroom filled with bright lights and cameras. The Alliance Council, a ring of high-ranking leaders from dozens of worlds, watched them closely. An old alien with a deep voice spoke first. Princess Lyra Valen, you have caused great unrest among your people. Do you understand the consequences of your actions? Lyra took a step forward, her voice steady. Yes, I understand that silence helps no one. My people were told to live in fear, to obey without question. I refused. I wanted peace without blood. If that is a crime, then I will answer for it. The council chamber went silent. Then the old alien turned his gaze to Ethan. And you, human Ethan Hayes, you risked your life to help her escape. Why? Ethan looked around at the room, filled with faces of every color and shape, all watching. Because I saw someone treated like an object. I saw someone who just wanted to live free. I didn't care if she was a princess or a runaway. She needed help, and that was enough. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Lyra's eyes softened as she watched him speak. After hours of questioning, the council finally withdrew to make their decision. Ethan and Lyra were placed in a small waiting room. The silence was heavy. Lyra sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly. "I was sure they would take me back to my father," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. "If they try, I'll fight them every step of the way." She smiled weakly. "Always protecting me," he shrugged. "It's kind of my job now." Before either of them could say more, the door opened. A council officer entered. "The verdict has been reached," he said. "Please come with me." They returned to the chamber where the council leader stood. After reviewing the evidence, he announced, "The Alliance Council declares Princess Lyra free from royal custody. Her father's rule over her title is hereby suspended until further review. The human Ethan Hayes is cleared of all charges and commended for acts of bravery." Lyra gasped softly. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The leader continued, "You are both free to go, but we advise you to remain under Alliance protection. Your father's forces may not accept this outcome." As they left the hall, reporters crowded the corridor shouting questions. "Princess, are you returning home? Human."
How did you survive the chase?
Lyra ignored them, gripping Ethan's hand tightly. They stepped into a quiet corridor away from the noise. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile. "We are free," she whispered. Ethan nodded, still in disbelief. "Yeah, somehow we made it." She turned to face him, her eyes glowing softly under the white lights. "You gave me courage, Ethan. I was running from everything, and you made me face it." He smiled. "Guess we both did some facing." Lyra looked thoughtful. "Now what will you do?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I'll fix ships again. Maybe I'll see Earth." She stepped closer. "And if I asked you to stay with me?" Ethan hesitated. "You're a princess again now. You don't need a human engineer by your side." Lyra smiled gently. "I don't need one, but I want one." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You really don't give up, do you?" Her tail swayed lightly behind her. "Not when it matters." Ethan looked at her. This brave, stubborn, unwanted princess who had changed the fate of worlds. And for once, he had no clever reply. He simply said, "Then I guess I'm staying." She reached out and held his hand again, her eyes bright with emotion. "Then maybe now I can finally stop running." As they stepped out into the docking bay, the station lights glowed like a rising dawn. The galaxy around them was still vast, still dangerous, but for the first time, it felt alive with possibility. And as Lyra whispered quietly, "Welcome to your new home," Ethan, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this strange alien world was exactly where he was meant to be. Days passed after the hearing, and the great noise of the galaxy slowly began to fade. The broadcast had already spread across hundreds of worlds. Some called Lyra a hero, others called her a rebel, but most called her brave. Ethan stayed beside her through all of it, quietly helping her adjust to the new life under Alliance protection. They were given a small living space inside the capital station, with wide windows that showed the endless stars. It was peaceful but strange. Lyra often stood by the window, staring into the lights. "All my life," she said softly, "I looked at these stars and felt trapped. Now I can walk free among them, but I don't know where I belong." Ethan smiled faintly. "Welcome to being human. We spend our whole lives asking that question." She looked at him curiously. "Do you ever find the answer?" He shrugged. "Sometimes. And sometimes the answer finds you." She didn't reply, but her eyes stayed on him a little longer than before. That evening, they were invited to a diplomatic dinner hosted by the Alliance Council. Leaders from different worlds came to meet Lyra, the unwanted princess who had stood against her father's rule. Ethan wore a borrowed uniform, though he felt awkward among the polished tables and glowing chandeliers. Lyra walked beside him in a simple white gown that shimmered like moonlight. Everyone turned to look at her when she entered. One of the diplomats bowed and said, "Princess Lyra, your courage has inspired billions. You gave the galaxy hope." Lyra smiled politely, but her eyes drifted toward Ethan. "I only did what was right, but I could not have done it alone." A few heads turned toward him, and Ethan felt the heat rise in his face. He wasn't used to attention. He had only wanted to protect her, not to become a symbol of anything. After the event, when the music faded and the hall grew quiet, they returned to their quarters. Lyra removed the shining necklace she had been given and placed it on the table. "They speak as if courage is easy," she said quietly. "But courage is just fear that keeps walking." Ethan chuckled softly. That's a good way to put it. She turned to him, her silver hair falling over her shoulders. Ethan, when I ran away, I didn't believe anyone would help me. Every world I visited turned me away. But you didn't ask who I was. You just helped. He looked at her kindly. Because you needed it. You didn't have to earn it. Her eyes softened. That's why you are different, humans. They love without reason. Ethan smiled a little. We just try to do the right thing, even when it makes no sense. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the soft hum of the station. Outside, the stars looked calm, but somewhere beyond, the royal fleet was still out there. Lyra's father hadn't spoken publicly since the council's ruling, and rumors said he was gathering his loyal forces again. One night, as Ethan was checking the communications log, a private message arrived. It was encrypted, but the sender ID made his stomach twist. It was from the royal fleet. He opened it carefully. A familiar voice filled the cabin. This is General Kale of House Valen. Tell the princess her father wishes to speak with her. One meeting. No soldiers. He only wants words. Ethan looked up. Lyra had been standing behind him, silent. Her face showed no surprise. I knew he would call, she said quietly. Ethan frowned. It could be a trap, maybe, she said. But if I run forever, I'll never be free. He didn't like it, but he understood. Then I'm coming with you. The next day, they boarded a small diplomatic shuttle and flew to the meeting point, a neutral moon orbiting a dying star. The landing site was empty except for one royal cruiser and a single figure waiting outside it. Lyra stepped out first, her posture straight and proud. Ethan followed a few steps behind her. The figure turned. It was her father, the High King. His once proud face looked tired now, marked by guilt and loss. He looked at her long and silently. My daughter, he said at last, you have brought shame to our house, but also honor I did not understand. Lyra's voice was calm. You taught me to obey, father, but you never taught me to choose. I only wanted peace. I wanted to stop the wars that took so many lives. The king lowered his head. And you succeeded where I could not. The people no longer follow my fear. They follow your hope. Lyra's eyes softened. Then stop chasing ghosts. Let our world heal. The old king nodded slowly. Perhaps it is time I learned from my daughter. His gaze shifted to Ethan. And from her human protector. You risked your life for her. Why? Ethan answered honestly. Because she deserved the chance to live her own life. Everyone does? The king studied him for a long moment, then gave a small, weary smile. You have a strange wisdom, human. My people once saw your kind as dangerous. Perhaps you are, but in a better way than we thought. He turned back to his ship. Go now. The galaxy has changed, and so must I. When the cruiser left, the silence of the empty moon felt peaceful. Lyra turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with emotion. It's over, she whispered. He nodded. Yeah, it's really over. They stood side by side, watching the royal ship disappear into the distance. Then Lyra smiled softly and said, Now I can begin again. Ethan chuckled. And where do you want to begin? She looked up at the stars. Anywhere. As long as you're there, he laughed quietly. Careful. You're starting to sound human, she smiled. Maybe I am. Later that night, back on the shuttle, Lyra fell asleep beside the window. Ethan sat across from her, watching her peaceful face in the faint starlight. For the first time since he'd met her, there was no fear in her expression, only calm. He looked out at the stars beyond the glass and whispered, Guess we made it, princess. Her voice, half asleep, answered softly, No, Ethan, we made it. And as the small ship drifted toward a new sunrise, the unwanted alien princess and the human who refused to abandon her began the next chapter of their lives. Two souls from different worlds, bound not by fate, but by choice.